took care of business in the Sugar Bowl yesterday against Georgia. But most importantly, I want to talk about NFL playoffs, and I want to talk about this big game coming up on Sunday Night Football with the Lions and the Vikings. I mean, it truly does not get any better than this. Both teams 14-2, and the winner of this game will have everything. You'll get a bye, you'll get home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs, and you'll be in a great position to make the Super Bowl. The loser, on the other hand, will be on the road likely at Tampa as the 5 seed in the NFC. I mean, it's rare when you find a regular season game of this magnitude where so much is riding on one single game. And how often are we going to have an opportunity in our lifetimes to see a game where you have two teams sitting at the end of the year 14-2 and winner take all? And what a division that's been in the NFC North this year with Detroit, with Minnesota, and with Green Bay. And the crazy part is the Lions right now at home in this game on Sunday night, they're a 3-point favorite. You know, early in the year, they won at Minnesota. And throughout most of the season, the Lions looked like an unstoppable force that had a destiny in where they were on their way to the Super Bowl. But with injuries and so many devastating injuries on the defensive side of the ball, I think it's kind of shifted how we look at the Lions right now. We know their offense is great. We know they have great speed and skill position players. They're terrific at home. They've got a great offensive line. They have a head coach that's really cool, but he's also crazy, and he can't be trusted with his gambling nature in big situations. But the defense is going to be a problem. And right now the Vikings are surging and look like a team that's peaking at the right time. And most importantly, they're getting MVP play from a quarterback that was an unlikely source in Sam Darnold. He got drafted by the Jets, and like every quarterback that gets drafted by the Jets, he got ruined because the franchise is a piece of crap. The Jets are a joke. They're a laughingstock. Like the Browns, you can point fingers at all these different franchises, and it's no wonder that certain franchises always find a way to reach the bottom of the pack. That's because their leadership is poor, their ownership is foolish, and they have no clue of what they're doing. And more importantly, they don't hire the right people and put them in the right places to be able to run their football team. They're idiots. The Haslam family that runs the Browns are complete buffoons. How do you give $230 million fully guaranteed to Deshaun Watson unless you've got some sort of brain damage or something? You morons. You're trying to reset the quarterback market and give Watson $230 fully guaranteed? And then the Jets, they're a laughingstock. They've been crap most of my life. Bill Parcells had them in an AFC title game and nearly got them to a Super Bowl, which tells you how great of a coach Bill Parcells was. But for the most part, outside of a couple of teams in the late 80s with Ken O'Brien and then Vinny Testaverde near the end of his career with Bill Parcells, the team's been a joke. So I love seeing guys like Sam Darnold now going from being thrown on the scrap heap to getting an opportunity to restore his name with Kyle Shanahan, and now he's in Minnesota with Coach O'Connell, who's a terrific coach. They got great skill position players, and now he's in a position where he's going to become a free agent, and he's going to have a chance to make big-time money and become a big-time quarterback because he's proving that he's got the ability. And so we're going to hear from Jordan Palmer, who's now a quarterback coach, who works with a lot of top-line guys, including Josh Allen and Sam Darnold. And he'll talk about, you know, the things that have put Darnold in a position to have great success. Now, college football-wise, honestly, for me, after ASU and Oregon went down, I am struggling to find something to latch onto in the semifinals and the title game. Do you feel the same way? And I would imagine for you Duck fans, look, I'm a sports fan too, okay, so I know how this whole thing works. When your team loses a big game and the season's over, I would imagine there are some of you that won't even bother to watch the rest of the playoff because it's just too painful. You're frustrated with the loss, and I get it, man. I've been there. I have been there. So for me right now, like I love the Sun Devils, and I love Cam Scatteraboo and Kenny Dillingham, and I'm a big fan of Sam Levitt, but, you know, there's a little bit of sting after that loss to Texas, especially since I just hate Texas because they were so close. They had them to one play, and they gave up a touchdown pass on 4th and 13. It's like, what are you doing? It drove me crazy, but the problem is with the teams that are remaining, I'm having a difficult time finding something to latch onto because these are teams that I think we all love to hate just a little bit. You know, with Ohio State, I'm stunned at how well they're, you know, playing right now and the way they played in the first two games against Tennessee and Oregon coming off the loss to Michigan. Absolute dominance, and for the first time this season, the offense and the defense is clicking simultaneously. Curtin Hillsborough made a great point yesterday. He's a big Duck fan. He blames Michigan for the resurgence, and I think he's right. I had a conversation once with Rod Smith, former Denver Bronco great, about the Broncos' loss in the 96 playoffs to Jacksonville. They were the number one seed. They were the best team in football, and they were destined to go to the Super Bowl until they weren't, and they got upset as a double-digit home favorite by Jacksonville, for crying out loud. And it was the most devastating loss as a fan I've ever experienced. And I was just sitting there with my head in my hands trying to absorb that loss. It was absolute destruction. At that point, I was like, great, Elway's never winning a Super Bowl. It's over. But what Rod Smith told me is that loss, as bad as it was in the moment, turned out to be the absolute blessing because it changed the way that they go about their entire business. The way they practice, the way they focus, the attention to detail from the coaching staff, the front office, and the players. He said that transformed the franchise, and that loss was the motivating factor behind what they became when they won back-to-back championships. So I'm wondering if that loss to Michigan, and by the way, the loss to Michigan, if you look at the way they played in the last 2 weeks against Tennessee and Oregon, it's further proof that was coaching malpractice by Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. What kind of a game plan was that? What were you guys doing? Because you got the talent to beat anybody. But what they did is use that moment, as bad as it was, and it was bad, as a teaching moment, and they went back and they just took a look at everything. It was so bad that you go through and you look at everything and you start to question everything, and it's allowed them to do a full reset and put themselves on the path. And now look at the way they're playing. And look at the way Will Howard's played in the last 2 games. He's been unbelievable. So the question with Ohio State now is, can they keep it up for 2 more games? Now with Penn State, can they win the big one with James Franklin? They always beat the teams they're supposed to beat. Can they keep it going against stiffer competition like Notre Dame? Drew Aller has improved his draft stock with the way he's played down the stretch. Size and arm strength are impressive. He might be a first-rounder if he went out into the NFL right now, but, of course, he's going to go back for another year at Penn State. I love their front 7. They got a nasty pass rush, and their running backs are terrific. How will the offense fare against Notre Dame? They're going to have to find a way to score points to get over on the Irish. Now, with Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman is a young star in the coaching ranks. He's intense, great recruiter. He's very handsome. The players clearly love and respect him. Notre Dame's passing game definitely lacks power. I think Leonard had like 90 yards passing and 1 touchdown in the win yesterday against Georgia. But they run it well, and they play great defense. He's clearly getting a different type of athlete than Brian Kelly was. You know, Brian Kelly, the fraud that's now at LSU that left Notre Dame because he didn't feel like he could win a national championship. And now Marcus Freeman's got them in a position to do that. The one thing I do know is don't count them out. Run game and great defense can take you a long way in the playoffs. Now for Texas, the talent's off the charts. But the big question is Quinn Ewers. Can he limit the big mistakes and be productive against the Buckeyes? And I'm just not so sure. You know, Ewers didn't play a great game against Arizona State. Had a horrible pick late in the 4th quarter, but then there he was in overtime throwing that touchdown pass to Golden on 4th and 13. Checking into a great play and getting his offensive line set to pick up the blitz. So he's got the makings of everything you need to be a great quarterback. He's just got to learn to be more consistent and limit the big mistake. Because when you make a mistake against Ohio State right now, they're going to make you pay. So, you know what's crazy, though? Like, if you would have rolled up on little Chad in, let's say, 1987 or 1988, and let's say you pull me aside and you say, hey, Chadwick, in 2024 they're going to have an expanded playoff of 12 teams, and the Final Four is going to be Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, and Notre Dame, I would have been like, yeah, that sounds about right. The more things change, the more they stay the same. All right, let's keep things rolling here. We're going to come back, and when we do, Max Torres of Scoop Duck is going to join the show. And the big question is, how does Oregon continue to move the program in that upward trajectory and get the type of depth that we see with the other big schools so they can truly compete for a national championship? We'll find out next on the Rip City Drive. All right, Rip City Drive, Chad doing here live at Spirit Mountain Casino. And joining us right now from Scoop Duck is Max Torres, who was at the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. Max, good afternoon. Thank you for coming on the show, my friend.
Hey, Chad, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, before we get to the game and the result, I just want to ask you, I've been to a Rose Bowl before, but in regards to this game with Ohio State and Oregon, the setting, the scene, the weather, how did it match up to what you thought it would be like when you got down there?
It was everything you could ask for from that standpoint. It was a beautiful sunny day in Southern California, warmer than I expected maybe getting to the game, but the setting was amazing. The environment was great. Both fan bases really showed up, and the B-2 bomber flyover at the beginning was easily one of the highlights for me.
Yeah, that picture and that scene with the B-2 flyover was amazing. In the first half, as you were watching it unfold, what surprised you the most at what Ohio State was able to do early in that game?
I think what surprised me the most was just how effectively they moved the ball. I think Oregon had really been able to kind of contain them in the first matchup between these two teams. They had their big games here and there, but they were just blowing the doors off of the Ducks, for lack of a better word. It just looked like at times the Ducks didn't really even belong on the same field as them. Not to be overly negative, but I was just shocked, as I'm sure a lot of others were, that the Buckeyes were able to just slice and dice their way down the field, and it felt like everything was working for them. No pressure from the Oregon front for a lot of those drives, even though Jordan Birch was back. So a lot of big surprises there for me, Chad.
You know, Max, how this works, and you've probably heard from a lot of the same Duck fans I have, is that when you lose a big game like this, everyone gets really upset and frustrated, and with a loss like that, everyone wants to point the finger and blame something or someone for the result. So I'll ask you this. Was this just a case of Ohio State playing a near-perfect game and it was too much for Oregon, or were there certain situations throughout the game that you didn't think Oregon did maybe as well as they could have, or what they should have done that led to this defeat? What do you think went wrong? How would you pinpoint that?
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint it to any one thing. I mean, you have to take your cap off to Ohio State. It did really feel like they were just locked in and executing to near perfection. You got to tip the cap to their offensive line, especially with how they navigated injuries and just really took it at the Oregon defensive front. So I think that they just looked like they were more locked in and ready to go. Maybe that had something to do with the long layoff for Oregon as the number one seed that drew a first-round bye. I'm not saying that was the only reason. Watching that game again, Chad, I think another thing that really stuck out to me was, I don't know if I'd say the preparedness of the defense, but there were multiple instances throughout that game where Oregon was trying to get lined up, or you know, some of the DBs and linebackers were making checks, and they just weren't ready for the upcoming play. And if you're not even on the same page as a defense, I don't know how you're expected to contain an offense as explosive as Ohio State's, led by a wide receiver like Jeremiah Smith, who seems like he's just a generational talent. So I think it was a combination of factors, but you know, and injuries also didn't help with Evan Stewart not being able to go after his stellar game in October against the Buckeyes. Jordan James going down early with what maybe was a head injury, but he didn't return. They couldn't run the ball. I mean, it was a perfect storm, it almost felt like, of just everything going right for Ohio State, and Oregon was battling their tails off, but it just wasn't enough in the end.
We're talking with Max Torres from Scoop Duck. He covers the Oregon Ducks and college football. What did you make of Dylan Gabriel's performance?
Definitely not one of Dylan Gabriel's better games. You don't need me to tell you that. I think really what I was almost the most surprised about with that was just how he had to run for his life for most of this game for an Oregon offensive line that was so strong in this year. I just was not expecting, as I don't think Dylan Gabriel was expecting, to be running as much as he was. He just kind of looked off, like from earlier in the game, and that was really unexpected because he's played so much of his best football this season on the biggest stage, when the lights are the brightest, against the toughest opponents. Look what he did the first time they played, but we can reference that first matchup all we want. It doesn't really matter what happened in that first game because you got to put your cleats on and put your pads on and play the next matchup. So Yeah, just a rough outing for Dylan Gabriel. He didn't get any help from his run game either, so that obviously was making it tough for him. But just a rough day at the office for him and the rest of the Ducks, really.
You know, Max, I wanted your impression on Dan Lanning. I really like how he handles his business. I was impressed at the post-game press conference in that difficult moment where, you know, he's like, hey, we lost. That's on me. And he took the blame for it, but also no excuse making. He didn't complain about the seeding or the situation or the way the playoff was set up. He's like, we've got to be better. I have to be better to put my players in a position to have success. What was your takeaway on how he handled that?
Yeah, I like how he handled himself when I was at the post-game press conference. He definitely did get a couple of those questions, Chad, where it was like, hey, you know, we all didn't really think this is the best way for the playoff to be formatted, but hey, we're kind of lobbing this one up to you if you want to kind of air it out and tell us your frustrations. But he didn't take the bait on any of that and really just owned the loss, which is exactly what you want from a head coach. But I think it begs the question, just what happened between the Big Ten Championship and the Rose Bowl that made Oregon start as flat as they did, look as discombobulated as they did. Because part of that obviously lies on the head coach. So I'm not trying to be critical of him in that way. I think he handled himself with class and with respect. Definitely gave Ohio State the flowers that they earned and deserved in that post game, and kind of took that one on the chin. So it's back to the drawing board, and I think he's going to have his guys locked in and certainly fired up for the 2025 season opener.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, you wrote about this, and I want to ask you about this because I think this is the most important question, Max. You know, what does Oregon have to do in the recruiting game, in the portal, as they continue to build this program? They obviously have great talent and great top-line talent, but they don't have the same type of depth that we see maybe at Ohio State or Texas or some of these other big schools that are going to be competing for a national championship. And winning a national championship requires a lot of things, including depth. So what do you think are the steps for Lanning and his crew to get into a position to where you can really have that type of depth, so when you lose a running back in the Rose Bowl or another player goes down in the offensive line when you start the year out, that you can have sustained success, you know, with the attrition that comes with football?
Well, a lot of that answer really kind of lies in just continuing what he's already doing, which probably isn't the answer Ducks fans want to hear coming off of a loss like that. But the Ducks are stacking elite recruiting classes, which is what you have to do. That's a prerequisite, it feels like, to win a national championship in today's era of college football. You got to stack class after class. And I think this is 3 recruiting classes now. Actually 4. If you go into next season, that'll be 4 recruiting classes. Maybe 3.5 if you count the 2022 class. That's when Lanning kind of came in, right? So the 25 class is his 3rd full cycle. So you just got to get those guys in and make sure you continue to strike that balance between the high school ranks and the transfer portal. But for me, when I wrote about this, I thought in part it boils down to a couple of specific positions. I think that the Ducks have some great players in the secondary, but clearly you look at the 2023 season, you look at the 2024 season, the play of the secondary against Washington, both those games last year, and then against Ohio State here on the big stage in the Rose Bowl, it just wasn't at the level that it needed to be. Moving forward is the safety position, because the Ducks have not had a truly elite game-changing safety since Javon Holland, and that was 5 years ago at this point. So I think that that's the position I'm probably looking for Oregon to really take to the next level the most out of probably any on the field. And I think that if they can do that, they'll be more equipped for a matchup like this.
I know that, and you make a great point, Duck fans don't want to hear, patience right now, but it sounds, if I'm hearing you right, that the Ducks are doing the right things right now, and they're well positioned as they continue to move forward. So really it's just a matter of continuing to be patient with that process, because things will get better. And if you look around, whether it was Dabo Swinney or it was Nick Saban or it was Urban Meyer, coaches, when they come in and start to really perfect their craft, they don't win a championship overnight. It takes a little bit of time.
Absolutely. And it sounds so crazy to think, but when you really take a step back here and look at where the Ducks are at, Dan Lanning, this is his first head coaching job. This is his 3rd season at Oregon. You can talk about the riches that he inherited, but the whole challenge of college football is keeping your locker room and your roster stocked with elite talent, and that's not easy. So being able to bring those guys in, I think that's going to be a huge part of it. And then just being able to look back on experiences like this, playoff games, that's going to help him as a head coach and just, know how to navigate these challenges and these tough moments, because there's only so much you can do if you haven't been in that position as a head coach before in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State. And please, I don't want anyone to misconstrue this that Dan Lanning's a bad coach. That's the last thing I'm saying. It's just you only have your experience to lean on. So it wasn't a pretty result on New Year's Day in Pasadena, but I think it's going to be something that's going to help Dan Lanning continue to evolve as a head coach, because he's clearly proven to be one of the best in the sport.
Yeah, no doubt. And maybe the loss to Ohio State can prove to be a powerful motivator like Ohio State's loss to Michigan. Everyone that I have talked to, and even people I listen to around the country, they all seem to think Ohio State from top down has got the most talented roster in the country. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I would agree with it. I think that you look at just the guys that they're turning to at almost any position, and more often than not, it's a blue-chip recruit, a former All-American, and that's where Oregon's trying to get to. I can't remember who said it. It might have been Ari Wasserman with On 3. It was like Ohio State's the last of a dying breed insofar as, you have these just stacked rosters with 5 stars that are depth pieces, 5 stars that aren't even on the field. And that is really kind of becoming more and more rare. I think that's when you look at the Alabama teams under Nick Saban, just the depth was unbelievable. Part of that is the different recruiting landscape, and part of it also is just, hey, you just want to play for the GOAT. And that's not the situation that we're in anymore. So you're seeing a lot more of these top players getting spread out throughout the country to a lot of different teams, and maybe not going to an Ohio State, a Georgia, and Alabama as easily or as quickly as they maybe would have in the past.
Huh. Hey, what's your takeaway on the job that Kenny Dillingham has done at Arizona State in year number 2?
Gosh, I don't know how you can say anything other than Kenny Dillingham has done a phenomenal job. I think he's got probably the best story in college football right now, at least from a head coaching perspective, being a Tempe guy, going back to his alma mater and his stomping grounds where he grew up, and taking that Sun Devil team that was, God, I don't know if it's over dramatic to say it was more or less in shambles when he got there, and taking them all the way to the top of the Big 12 and then to the college football playoff. It's amazing, and being able to match up like they did against Texas and take that one down to the absolute wire is tremendous. So I don't know. Maybe we'll be talking about that Dan Lanning tree before too long as he continues to attract top coaches, and then those guys are going to get consideration for jobs like that.
All right, Max Torres is with us. One final question. Do you expect Dante Moore to be the starting quarterback next year for Oregon?
I think right now that's probably a safe assumption, but we got to get through spring ball and we got to get through fall camp. And I wrote about this earlier today with some of the quarterback movement that the Ducks saw with Jaron Chiave-Sagapolutele, entering the transfer portal, or he's planning to. Rather, that news broke. I think you can't count out Austin Novosad, because he's looked really good in the limited action that he's had at Oregon, but I do feel like at this point right now, that's kind of where all the arrows are pointing as towards Dante being the starter for next year.
All right, go to scoopduck.com right now. You get access to Ducks Only Forum. You get exclusive premium content. It's a terrific site, all things Oregon Ducks, and you can get it for just pennies per day and be able to stay up on your favorite team. He's Max Torres. He covers college football and the Ducks for Scoop Duck. Hey, Max. Dude, you're awesome, man. Thank you for coming on and making the show better today. And I'm sorry that the outcome of the Rose Bowl was not maybe what you were looking for, but, man, what an experience for you. That's great, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Chad. I appreciate you.
You got it, buddy. There's Max Torres killing it here on the show. All right, so Duck fans, how do you feel about that? You're in a great position. What else do you want? You've got unlimited resources. You have a beautiful football facility. You've got a great program. You're coming off an undefeated regular season. Yes, you got your ass whooped by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, but with Dan Lanning and the right pieces in the right places, which they have, they're going to continue to recruit. They're going to continue to press forward and continue to stack recruiting class on top of recruiting class and continue to load up the roster with talent. And more importantly, Dan Lanning will continue to grow in his role as head coach and get better at the details, which he got better at this year. He showed improvement. Now, I want to bring in my man, Brenden Slaughter, who also covers college football, is a recruiting expert for Beaver's Edge. And I want to ask you about the quarterback that announced he's going to enter the transfer portal, Sagotua Tele from Oregon. You followed his recruitment. What's your takeaway on what you see from him and what he's going through right now?
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting, Chad, and good to talk with you, my man.
Thank you.
It's he's someone that we're familiar with at Beaver's Edge because at one point he was considered to be an Oregon State lean. The Beavers kind of got on him early in the process before some of the other bigger schools came to be. He didn't end up committing to Oregon State, but it was still like some pretty good mutual interest there. Then committed to Cal and seemed to be pretty on board with Cal. And then flipped to Oregon. And from what I've heard, he didn't feel like he was going to be necessarily valued right away at Oregon. And everything that I've seen says he's still kind of looking for what he wants and that he's wanting to kind of compete to be a starter right away. And I think that kind of, Chad, goes back to Oregon, who seems to be all in with Dante Moore next year.
Well, I think the Ducks are in a good position. I mean, okay, Brenden, I'm going to ask you to do something that's very difficult for you, but remove your Beaver lens for a moment.
Sure.
And just look at the Ducks program as a whole with Dan Lanning. Like, they really are in a great spot in spite of the loss in the Rose Bowl, right? Like, moving forward, you got to feel pretty good about where they're at as a program, don't you?
Oh, without question. I mean, not just the Beaver fan of me, Chad. I thought they were going to win it all this year. I was as shocked as anybody when they did not really show up.
You did tell me that.
Yeah, and that was mostly because, Chris and I talked about it a little bit yesterday. I thought this was the best Oregon team I've seen in 28 years on this planet. And, there's some debate there, I'm sure, and now some will probably say it wasn't. But 13-0, the way that they had won in the Big Ten, the way that they'd kind of handled some challenges, I looked at the Wisconsin game like, okay, that's their bad game for the year. They've still played well. But nothing could have predicted a game like that, and I think they ran into an Ohio State buzzsaw that was very angry, very upset, as you mentioned, been on a tear since that Michigan flag planting situation. And, I think Oregon is set up as well as anybody, Chad, for all the reasons you mentioned. The money's never going to run dry. You've got some of the best facilities in college football. The swag is always going to be with Oregon. Kids, are going to naturally be drawn to that school, so I think Oregon with Dan Lanning is set up for the foreseeable future, if not further. Duck fans just got to have that patience, and you kind of want it all at once. You know what I mean? So that's tough. But I think Lanning's the right guy, and they're going to have the resources to do whatever they want. So, and as you said, things have to break right, Chad. You have to be healthy. You have to, have the ball bounce your way. It's not easy to win a national championship, especially not now.
Well, I understand sports hate as well as anyone. I hate Ohio State. Their fan
it's understandable.
Base, the arrogance, they're annoying. They think they're better than everyone. Like, I want them to go down now. But the problem is Will Howard's like one of the nicest human beings on the planet.
Is he really?
You listen to one of his post-game press conferences and just the way he communicates. It's like, dang you, Howard. I don't want – when my team loses, I hate it when I hear from the other side. And you're like when the Broncos got beat by the Jaguars in the playoffs in '96, Mark Brunell ripped my heart out with his stupid scrambling big plays that drove me crazy. But he's like a nice guy, and so it's hard for me to hate on a guy like that. Will Howard's the same way. All right, we'll keep things rolling. Duke, the UPS man, asked me a very interesting question. I'll share that with you next. Brian Noe, Fox Sports Radio is going to join me at 4:20 live here at Spirit Mountain Casino. We're going to be down here live for the countdown to the college football playoff on January 10th and also for the title game on the 20th. And tonight we have the Escape to Paradise drawings that I'll be voicing beginning at 7 o'clock. Brian Noe coming up at 4:20.
Sun Devils need the 35-yard line.
And look at all those bodies around the line of scrimmage.
Levitt moving the pocket. Backside pressure. Throw it outfield. Who else? Scatterboo.
What'd you say, Clark? Scatterboo, scatterboo, scatterboo.
Why not?
All right, just enjoying some Cam Scatterboo highlights here on the Rip City Drive. Man, I love Cam Scatterboo. I just got hit up by Duke, the UPS driver, my main man, and he asked me a very good question. He said, hey, what do you think about this? If you had to choose between Oklahoma and Arizona State to win the national title, where would you go? Well, I got to be honest with you now. It would be Arizona State only because, and no disrespect to my home state of Oklahoma, but it's simple. Cam Scatterboo stole my heart. You know, I've been going down to Arizona State games for years, but this Cam Scatterboo, in fact, I came up with my list. I put together a list today of my top 5, favorite college football players in my lifetime that I've had a chance to see. And so I've got my list of 5 here. Cam Scatterboo is on that list. I was just captivated by his style, his toughness, his energy, his, incredible sack. The guy's got giant sack. He's unreal. I mean, you saw it. In fact, I converted Duke, the UPS guy, into a Cam Scatterboo fan. He finally checked him out, and he's like, oh, I think you're right, man. This guy's pretty awesome. But my top 5 in my lifetime, Jamel Holloway, who was the first true freshman to win a national championship. He did so at 1985 at Oklahoma under Barry Switzer. That was a great team, and that was my introductory course into being a sports fan, was that 85 national championship team. 10-year-old Chad was a huge fan of Oklahoma football, and Jamel Holloway running the wishbone and the option, and Barry Switzer was, well, I've shared this story before, but, it's kind of like Nana was like, okay, Jesus is here, and then Barry Switzer is here. Barry Switzer was king. He was the man back then. Loved Barry. And so Jamel Holloway, fell in love with him right away, and I had a number 4 jersey that I'd wear in the house running around with my underwear on, and I thought it was the greatest jersey of all time. When you get a gift sometimes, I think I got that one from Nana. When you get the gift and you're like, dude, this is the greatest gift that anyone could have ever gotten me. I mean, I wore that thing until it wore out. One of the old school jerseys with I don't know what it's nylon or whatever with the holes in it and stuff. There was the crop top where it came down to your belly button. I mean, that was the thing back in the day. So Jamel Holloway, Cam Scatterboo, LaMichael James at Oregon is one of the most impressive running backs I've ever seen. That year he had in 2010 was off the charts. One of the best I've ever seen. Barry Sanders is the best player I've ever seen. His 1988 season is truly remarkable. It's the greatest season in the history of college football. The 88 numbers are awesome. And Barry Sanders, if you get bored one day, just pull up Barry Sanders 1988 highlights Oklahoma State, and it'll blow your mind. And the other guy to make my top 5 was Marshall Faulk, who turned out to be a Hall of Famer in the NFL. But his college time at San Diego State was awesome. Other guys that just missed the list, Rocket Ishmael at Notre Dame. The Irish, when I was younger, from 88 up until 93, the Irish they won a national championship. Lou Holtz did a great job with them, but Rocket Ishmael was awesome. And Notre Dame had some big-time players back then, but Rocket was incredibly fast, incredibly gifted, and one of the best returners in the history of college football. He was a legitimate, true weapon, and his speed was unmatched. So Rocket Ishmael just missed the list, but he was another one of those guys who was, near the top of the list. And there are other guys. Josh Heupel, the quarterback at Oklahoma that went undefeated, won the national championship in 2000. I know the coach now at Tennessee. He was a great quarterback, a lefty, and he wasn't the most skilled quarterback on the planet, but he had a little moxie to him, which I appreciated. So you come across guys like that. I mean, even Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State when he was quarterback, he played with Barry Sanders. He had a certain moxie and toughness to him, which I really respected. Not the best quarterback. He was good, but not great, but a little bit of moxie and some toughness. Unfortunately, I was a huge – John Elway's my guy, and, I fell in love with him when I moved to Denver, and he had just come into the league as the Broncos quarterback. But he, when he was playing at Stanford, that was a little bit before my time as a full-fledged sports fan. I'm trying to think of who originally introduced me to the sports world, and then it kind of flipped me upside down. It was probably my papa and my Uncle Truman, who's been a big Oklahoma State fan his whole life. Like, he loves football too. Unfortunately, he's a Cowboy fan, so I just ignore that nonsense. But the Dallas Cowboys, but he's an Oklahoma State fan. And my dad went to Oklahoma State, and my dad would take me to Oklahoma State games when I was younger, but I didn't really appreciate it at that time because Oklahoma State was, well, they were they played second fiddle to Oklahoma. And my dad went to Oklahoma State, but I was an Oklahoma fan, and he didn't want to take me to Norman to go see the Sooners play. He's like, well, I took you to Oklahoma State. Yeah, but Dad, they suck. Why are you doing that to me, man? What's amazing to me is how some of these schools land great players. In 1987, Oklahoma State's starting running back was Thurman Thomas, who became a Hall of Famer, Buffalo Bill great. Barry Sanders sat on the bench in 1987 because he was playing behind Thurman Thomas. So in literally consecutive years, the Cowboys went from Thurman Thomas to Barry Sanders. That's not a bad transition.
It's a heck
Hall
of
of Famer to Hall of Famer. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
So there you go. One thing that was cool, like Marcus Dupree, who was a great Oklahoma recruit, like an absolute tank at running back. Injuries created some issues for him, but I went down to the Rams training camp with my buddy Jeff and his dad in the summer of '91, and he was in training camp working under John Robinson that year, which was pretty sweet. Todd Light was down there. I saw Henry Ellard, got to meet Jim Everett. So 16-year-old, I was just about to turn 16, and I'm down there at Rams camp meeting all these NFL guys. And there wasn't the type of security you see nowadays. They had like a little yellow rope that was separating you from the players, and they would come over during their breaks to sign autographs and talk. That was freaking awesome, man. All right, we'll keep things rolling. We'll come back. I want to talk about some of the Trailblazers with the young guys that we saw last night. And Ant got point number 5,000. Brian Noe's coming up at 4:20. You've got the Rip City Drive.
Here's what you need to know.
From the Goldberg Jones Sports Desk, your 620 Rip City Radio headlines. Goldberg Jones. Call 1-800-DIVORCE.
All right, Chad here. It's now 4 o'clock. Trailblazers take a loss last night in L.A. to the Lakers, 114-106. Anthony Simons, 23 points, hit the career point number 5,000. They'll continue their 5-game road trip tomorrow in Milwaukee against Dame and the Bucks. Tip at 5. Chris Burkhardt has Blazers game day at 3. Here on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio, presented by Coors Light. The college football playoff semifinal set for January 9th and 10th. Penn State will meet Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl. Irish favored by 1.5. Ohio State and Texas in the Cotton. Buckeyes a 6.5-point favorite. 4-star Oregon quarterback Jaron Sagapuatele, a 2025 prospect, is confirmed he's going to enter the transfer portal. Sunday Night Football in Detroit's awesome. Lions host the Vikings. Both teams at 14-2. The winner gets home field throughout the NFC playoffs. Kickoff 5:20 in BC. Lions are favored by 3. Brian Noe, Fox Sports Radio, will join me on the Rip City Drive coming up in 20 minutes.
The home of the OSAA is 620 Rip City Radio.
This is such a great song. I got to be honest with you. The new Yacht Rock documentary that was put out by Bill Simmons, I think it's on HBO Max. It pisses me off. Look, I listen to Yacht Rock, but the term Yacht Rock and the way that it's presented, it's kind of a goof on these great musicians. And I don't like the way that it's presented because it takes away from one of the greatest eras and mixtures of different musical styles that we've ever seen in the biz. I mean, we're talking about the best of the best getting together in one studio and collaborating and making phenomenal music. So I listen to Yacht Rock. I giggle at the term Yacht Rock or the Urban Dictionary definition of Yacht Rock, but it really takes away from how terrific these bands and these musicians were with the music they created during that period of time. So I know a lot of people have been asking me about it, but yeah, it's entertaining, but there's more to it than just that. I mean, come on. You got to show some respect to the best of the best. All right, Brian Noe, Fox Sports Radio, got to get his take on the Lions and Vikings this Sunday Night Football. Get his take on the Irish. How do they match up against Penn State? He's got to feel pretty good after the win over Georgia yesterday. The final few seconds of the first half, and then the opening to the second half put the Irish in a prime position to win that game. And physically, they held up against Georgia, which was very impressive to me. So Brian Noe coming up in 20 minutes. I do want to talk some basketball. The Trailblazers last night took the loss to the Lakers in L.A., 114-106. LeBron James, look, the poser, the fake artist, LeBron James, he drives me crazy, but he was awesome last night. 38 points. He made 7 of 10 from downtown, and the Trailblazers just had no answer for what he was able to do. They continued to fight throughout the game. They got back in a position with 2:28 left on the clock to win, but they just couldn't get over the hump, and LeBron James was a big reason why. But there are some things to be excited about right now if you're a Trailblazer fan. This season, as you've heard me talk about, is largely about player development. I mean, it's really about player development. That's the key. That's really the most important thing is, the development of the young players on the roster. And those guys would be Donovan Clingan, Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp, Denny Avdia, and Tamani Kamara. And last night we saw more flashes of brilliance from some of those guys. Denny Avdia last night, 19 points and 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 8 of 14 from the floor. I mean, he has really settled into his role. And I know that the majority of Blazer fans probably weren't too aware of who Denny Avdia was when they acquired him on draft night because he came from Washington. And anyone in their right mind is not going to seek out the Washington Wizards to watch basketball games. I would rather stick needles in my eyes than watch the Wizards play hoop. It's a horrific franchise. They're not even relevant. No one cares about the Wizards. But the Blazers went out, and they had been targeting him for quite some time. That's what Joe Cronin told us on Media Day. So they went out and acquired him. He's on a very team-friendly deal. But what's great about Denny Avdia is, one, he's young, early 20s, but he's multifaceted when he's on the floor because he can defend. He's a very physical player. He can handle the rock. He can facilitate the offense. He can get up and down in transition. Smart basketball player, very passionate in the way he plays and goes about his business. Brings real culture to the locker room. His teammates like him. And he's been nothing short of terrific so far this year. I would argue that Denny Avdia so far this year has been the Trailblazers MVP. So Denny Avdia is right now on the pathway to success. He's only going to continue to get better as he continues to get more comfortable in his role. He's been a starter this year. He's come off the bench. And what I love about Avdia, he's not worried about the personal stat line or getting his touches or this or that. Whatever the coach wants him to do, if it will help the team win, he's all about it, and he embraces that. He is the quintessential team guy, and he can do a lot of different things on the floor, and he makes his teammates around him better. I mean, there's no reason why not to love him if you're playing with Denny Avdia, but he's been terrific. Tamani Kamara last night was everywhere. He had 18 points. He shot the ball well, 8 of 13 from the floor. He was 2 of 4 from downtown. And we're seeing improvement with his offense this year. But what I love, too, is that not just the scoring and the defense, which is nonstop. Like, the guy is just a complete irritant on the defensive end. He wants to pick you up full court. He wants to get up in your business. He'll take charges. He's got toughness. He's got great length. He's very physical. Tamani Kamara is exactly what you want on an NBA basketball team. But what I like now and what we're starting to see more of is that he peppers the stat sheet. So he'll grab the rebounds. He'll set up his teammates with the assists, but the block shots and the steals. I mean, he's just constantly all over it. And he played big minutes last night, 38 minutes, and most of that is running around on the floor. I talked to Tom Haberstroh last night in the Blazer pregame. Nobody on the floor in terms of miles traveled moves more defensively than Tamani Kamara. So when he's on the floor, he's working his tail off. So he's been terrific. Shaedon Sharpe last night, 19 points, 5 boards. He was 6 of 16 from the floor. But, you know, a few weeks ago, Coach Billups was talking about the desire for him to become more aggressive. Well, he's regained the confidence in his shot, and now we're seeing him really in attack mode on the offensive end, which is terrific. That's what you want from him. So really like the way he's coming along, and he's continuing to show flashes. He's not where he needs to be, but he's young, but he's continuing to make strides in that department. Now with Scoot Henderson, 12 points, 8 assists last night, 3 turnovers. He had a blocked shot. He has played a lot better over the last couple of weeks. And then Donovan Clingan last night got 17 minutes. So what I'm hoping as the season progresses that we'll see Donovan Clingan continue to get more minutes, but those players I just mentioned are showing progress. And that's really what you want to see right now, because the wins and losses, you can't focus on those right now or it'll drive you insane. Sean Hyken of the Rose Garden Report put together a good piece a couple of days ago. You can check it out. Go to rosegardenreport.com. But he's got 5 questions for the Trailblazers in 2025. And the first question is, what is the market for the Blazers veterans at the deadline or this summer? And what he says, basically, teams are grappling with the restrictions of the new CBA, particularly teams in the second apron, which prevents you from combining salaries in a trade or taking back more money than you send out. It makes deals of any kind, particularly involving big salaries like Grant, Ayton, or Simons, more complicated than they used to be. So I've talked to him recently. He thinks the most likely player to be moved before the deadline this year would be Jeremy Grant. So if you're looking for a player to be dealt, Jeremy Grant would be the one, and then that will open up more playing time for a combination of, well, Denny Avdia and Tamani Kamara. But Jeremy Grant likely to be, or the most likely Blazer to be moved by the deadline. The other question he put up here was, what kind of coach will the Blazers be looking for after this season? Because this will be the final year of Chauncey Billups. I know that will make a lot of you Blazer fans very happy. But once that move is made, Hyken says, I'll be very curious what kind of coach they bring in to replace him. There are a lot of types of candidates they could look at. Will it be someone with previous NBA head coaching experience like James Borrego or the newly available Mike Brown? Will they try to lure a big-name college coach like Nate Oates from Bama? Will they go for an up-and-coming assistant on another NBA staff? The good thing is between Cronin and assistant GM Mike Schmitz, they do have a good black book. They got contacts. They have people they're looking at. And this is the other question that I hadn't thought about until he posed it. What's the plan if the lottery doesn't go as hoped? And Heiken says the Blazers have been in the lottery each of the last 3 seasons. In 2022, they had the 6th best odds and moved back to the 7th pick. In 2023, they had the 5th best odds and jumped up to the 3rd pick. And last year, they had the 4th best odds and fell back 3 spots to number 7. There's too much of the season left to predict where they're going to finish in the race to the bottom, but it will be somewhere in that ballpark. If they land the number 1, number 2, or number 2 pick in the lottery and get Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper, that may be the foundational star they need as they continue this rebuild. That would be the dream scenario. But what if they don't get lucky? What if they, once again, they're picking at 6th or 7th? Their 2 recent 7-0 overall picks, Shaden Sharp and Donovan Clingan, have both worked out pretty well so far. So falling back in the lottery isn't a death sentence, but neither of those guys are the guy every rebuilding franchise is looking for. The Anthony Edwards or Paolo Banchero. The Trailblazers still need that guy, and getting one of the top 2 or 3 picks is the best way to have a chance to get one of those guys. If they don't have that kind of fortune, what's the plan? And I think that's a great question. And also, how much patience will Blazers management have with Joe Cronin if things don't go as hoped in the upcoming lottery? So I don't know the answer to that, but I'm hoping that the Blazers will have good fortune in the lottery, because this upcoming draft is going to be stockpiled with absurd talent. Obviously, Cooper Flagg is the dream, and that would transform the franchise instantly. So that would be great if they could land something like that. But until then, and until the deadline approaches, as we get closer to the deadline, we have to continue to focus on player development. And all I can say is that the 4 young stars that I mentioned, in Toumani Camara, Deni Avdija, Donovan Clingan, Shaden Sharp, and I guess a 5th one in Scoot Henderson, we're seeing progress. More progress in the 4 other than Scoot Henderson, but Scoot is showing some progress over the last couple of weeks. We need that to continue. They need those guys to continue to develop and take their game to the next level, so they'll be in a position as they continue to progress. One thing I did want you to hear, Anthony Simons reached the 5,000-point mark, and after the game, Brooke Olzendam caught up with him in the locker room.
I know you would have preferred the win, but congratulations on 5,000 points, and now solely you at number 3 on the 3-point shooting list. I know, again, you wanted the dub, but can you take a moment to kind of be proud about that?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously a big milestone for me, being behind, the 2 guys that taught you a lot in the league, and it's a pretty cool moment, I would say, for sure.
All right, there's Ant, and then Coach Billups was asked about Ant after the game in terms of, what it is about his makeup that allows him to continue to progress and reach these type of milestones.
I think the main thing is just so much hard work, so much hard work at Summers, and him being dedicated to his craft, dedicated to trying to get better, knowing that his role has evolved every single year, which means the more attention and the bigger your role is, the more attention you will garner from the other team, figuring out how teams play, you have coverages. Then you got to figure out your own team, how to make players better and who can help you be better out there. So it's a lot, but he's doing it every single year, and he continues to get better.
There you go. There's Coach Billups. I like Ant a lot. He'll probably be dealt sometime in the near future based on the rebuild, but I love Ant. I think he's a good dude. His work ethic, he's still young in the league and continues to progress, but he represents the franchise well. All right, back to football. Brian Noe, Fox Sports Radio, is coming up next. We'll dive in on the last weekend of the regular season, some of the top storylines, including the Lions and the Vikings. The game's going to be awesome on Sunday Night Football. And Bino's a big Notre Dame fan. Got to get his take on the semifinals coming up with Ohio State meeting Texas and Notre Dame taking on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Brian Noe, Fox Sports Radio, is coming up next. Chad doing live here at Spirit Mountain Casino on 620 Rip City Radio. All right, joining us now for the first time in a brand new year is Brian Noe, Fox Sports Radio. My brother, B. Noe. Happy New Year, bro.
Happy New Year to you too, Chad Doing. Great to be on with you, man, for sure. And we are like we're experiencing the ball buffet right now. Before we have to hibernate soon, Chad. You know, so we got to watch I'm watching North Texas and Texas State as if it's the NFC Championship game right now. I'll take any ball that you throw in front of me.
I know. I love it so much. I don't hate on the Bulls. I watch them all. I enjoy it so much. Before we get to anything, I think you and I need to give ourselves some credit. How spot on were we about Brock Purdy and that whole Purdy-palooza nonsense with the 49ers?
Chad, doesn't it feel great to be so right? I mean, even if it's just now and then. I don't need it to be all the time. That'd be great, too. But just now and then, let us be extremely right. When we're getting hate mail and you're so stupid, and now I haven't found the Purdy-palooza people in quite a while. They're hiding right now.
Dude, the idea of giving him $50 to $60 million a year today just sounds absolutely absurd based on what I've seen this year. Crazy. And his fourth quarter numbers, Brian, give me a break.
I know it, and that's what we said the whole time, Chad. Is we never said he's bad. That's the thing that the Purdy-palooza people forget. We've never said he sucks. We've never said that. We've said he's good. He's just not a difference maker. And you're getting a glimpse of that. If you back up the Brinks truck for him, you've got to skimp at a lot of other positions on that roster. And he's just not that guy to cover up for those deficiencies on the roster. And with all the injuries this season, you got a glimpse of that. That's what the future looks like when you're paying him that much money.
Exactly. Here's what a difference maker is. Someone like Joe Burrow, who has a horrific defense, a head coach that doesn't understand clock management, and injuries across the board, and he's having an MVP-type season balling out of his ass. That's the difference maker, and that's the guy you want to pay $50 to $60 million to.
Yeah, that's right. And same thing with Josh Allen is another good example where if you look at what's around Josh Allen. James Cook is a good running back, and you've got a couple of pieces where there's Dalton Kincaid and there's Khalil Shakir. But he lost his number one guy in Stephon Diggs, and he's still putting up MVP numbers. If you dropped Purdy right into Buffalo right now as a Josh Allen replacement, he's not putting up the same numbers that Josh Allen is putting up, and he's not putting up the same numbers that he put up with the Niners at full strength when he's on his rookie contract.
Or, heck, even Patrick Mahomes. I mean, they lose their top-line receivers. One of his key guys go down. You need to run the football more. You need me to make smart decisions, be a third-down type player. Whatever you need me to do, Coach, I can make it happen. And, look, Patrick Mahomes has got the Chiefs playing the best football at the right time of the year once again. It's amazing.
Yeah, just winning. And all these people that are like, oh, they're so lucky. This team isn't even good.
I hate
it's
that.
like, yeah, you can't just luck your way to 15-1. That doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. All right, I want to ask you about Sam Darnold. This game coming up on Sunday. I mean, Brian, in our lifetime, can you recall a Week 18, Week 16, Week 17 game into the year, 14-2 against 14-2, and the winner takes all in the NFC and gets the bye and the home field advantage? This game is massive, but Sam Darnold, his resurgence this year, where are you at on Sam Darnold today?
I like Sam Darnold. I think that he's a little bit of it's a little bit Purdy-ish, right, Chad? Where, I mean, really, he's on a very affordable deal. He's played great this season, but you have to wonder, hey, what is a team getting into if they give him a huge contract, right? Whether that's Minnesota or some other team. You do have to wonder about that. So that's for the future, but for the here and now, with the weapons he has around him, when you've got Justin Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson and Aaron Jones and Jordan Addison, you've got a lot to work with, and give him credit. He looks completely different than he ever has throughout his NFL career, and he gives them a chance. With that, they've got a real defense. They're going to be a tough outcome playoff time, and for the people that are just like, oh, Darnold, I can't buy in. Look at last week. He outplayed Jordan Love. I'm not saying he walks on quarterback water, but he gives the Vikings a chance for a deep playoff run.
There's no question about it. So what do you think is the best way to handle it? I'll let you be the Viking GM. Would you franchise him and basically say, hey, let's see you do this another year before we open up and give you a contract where it's going to be multiple years? How would you handle it if you're the Minnesota Vikings?
Yeah, I think that's if it can be done, franchising him makes a lot of sense, because I would expect the Vikings, if they're smart, to be in the I'd like to date you a little longer before we take a mammoth step forward here. I want to find out. I need a little more information, like how do you handle it when I do something stupid, and do you lose your mind, or are you a good partner? You know what I mean? Like, it's the same thing with Darnold and the Vikings, I just think they need more information. You drafted J.J. McCarthy with hopes that he could be your quarterback of the future. So I don't think that they've given up on that possibility completely because Darnold's had this big year. And I don't know that they just buy Darnold as all of a sudden he's this new and improved great quarterback going forward. He might be. He might be like Baker Mayfield, same draft class, who knows. But I would want more information, and I wouldn't want to completely give up on J.J. McCarthy when you haven't seen him take one snap in the NFL yet.
We're talking with Brian O, Fox Sports Radio. Who do you think is going to win that game? My issue with Detroit right now, I feel for them because they were the best team in the NFC and arguably the NFL for the first half of the season, but the injuries have started to mount on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm just not sure they can get stops for an extended playoff run. Who do you think wins the game on Sunday?
I hear you, Chad. I'm still backing Detroit in that game. I mean, what you saw defensively their last game against the Niners, they really struggled getting stops. If not for our guy Purdy making a couple of horrible decisions and throwing interceptions, I don't know that the Lions win that game. So I fully understand the skepticism. Their defense is in rough shape right now with all those injuries. But I'm going to back them at home. They've been special this entire season. They're at home, chance to win the division, chance to win the 1 seed. That is going to be a tough ask for a Vikings team to go on the road and take everything away from Detroit. I would back the Lions in this spot.
Do you think the Lions have enough defense to assist the high-powered offense if they get home field to get to a Super Bowl?
I think that if they got home field and, maybe they get a little bit healthier, maybe they get a guy or two back defensively. We don't know about the other running back, if he can come back potentially with Montgomery. So maybe they get Anzalone, Montgomery back. That makes a difference. And I think you've got to win 2 games. If you've got the 1 seed, you've got to win 2 games to get to the Super Bowl. And I absolutely think they can do that, especially as a 1 seed. That first game, you're facing the lowest seed possible. So they're going to be favored. They might be heavily favored depending on the matchup. So absolutely, I give them a decent chance if they're a 1 seed to get to the Super Bowl, even in spite of all of those injuries.
What team do you think is best equipped to take them out in the NFC playoffs? Is it Philly? Is it the Rams? Is it somebody else? Who do you think is best equipped to deal with Detroit?
I think Philly is really difficult right now, and just matchup-wise, when you look at the playmakers offensively that the Eagles have, Saquon Barkley has been sensational, and then you've got the A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, 1-2 punch. That's a lot. And the Lions under Dan Campbell have been horrible defending mobile quarterbacks. And so you get Jalen Hurts back, and what he provides running the ball, that's obviously a whole lot more than what Stafford does and has ever did, running the football. So I would say it's Philly right now for a variety of reasons. But, man, there are a lot of tough outs when you look at all those injuries from the Lions standpoint that they're dealing with. There are a lot of teams who are like, man, this is not going to be easy. Right now as it stands, the Packers are a 7 seed. Washington is a 6 seed. So if you're facing one of those teams, Jaden Daniels, what he's done in his rookie season and what he can do with his legs running the football, these are not going to be easy outs with whoever they face in the first round. So I'm not saying it's Cakewalk City. It's not at full strength. I love the Lions. But as banged up as they are, I still like them a lot, just not nearly as much as if they were healthy.
All right, who's best equipped to win at Arrowhead? Is it Baltimore or Buffalo?
I would think on paper it's Baltimore, but I've seen this so many times with Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, Chad, and the Ravens themselves, they just wet themselves. And if you compare the two quarterbacks, it's a minor shock to a lot of people. If you look at Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, Chad, it's night and day. Lamar has been not even average. He's been below average in the postseason. And that's not anything that's personal or hating on him. It's just a fact. The guy's passer rating is around 75. That's incredibly low in the postseason. And Josh Allen is at 100. Josh Allen has thrown 21 touchdown passes and 4 picks. Lamar has thrown 6 touchdown passes and 6 interceptions. It's not even close. Lamar's 2-4 in the playoffs. So all of this is to say, I love Baltimore, what they have on paper, but when your pass defense sucks, and it has all season, that's not great when you're facing Mahomes. And when Lamar's numbers and his lack of production is so alarming, I would actually say the Bills are a tougher out for the Chiefs than the Ravens are.
Yeah, we could get that classic Bills-Chiefs matchup in the AFC title game, and that would be a phenomenal football game without question. Do you think my Denver Broncos have found their future quarterback in Bo Nix?
I think they have. I like what Bo has done in his rookie season. I think he's been pretty steady. I don't think we've seen many games where it's just like, oh, my gosh, he looked like a complete rookie this game. It hasn't happened very often, right? So, yeah, for a rookie season, I think this has been a success, especially when you go back to when he was originally drafted. All you heard was, man, that's such a reach, 12th overall. What are they doing? Right?
I was one of those guys.
Yeah. I didn't know that was my Chad Doing impression right there. I didn't realize.
It was good. It was good, yeah.
Yeah. But I think you would be optimistic as a Broncos fan based on what you've seen. I don't know that he's a 10, 15-year, like upper echelon guy. I don't know that he's going to be that. But it's a promising rookie season. There are still some things to work on. He's got to be more consistent. But I think any Bronco fan realistically would have taken what he's done this season based on where the expectations were when he was a week 1 rookie.
All right, Bino, Fox Sports Radio. Well, I tell you what, Marcus Freeman, you got to feel good as a Notre Dame fan right now. The Irish in the semifinal, they're going to take on Penn State. And, it's funny because, Brian Kelly, the fakester who went to LSU with the fake accent and all the nonsense and talked about how he went to a place because he felt like he had a better chance to win a national championship. And Marcus Freeman's got them knocking on the door. It looks like he's getting a different type of athlete. I was just impressed with how they held up physically against Georgia. That was impressive to me.
Yeah, me too, man, because there have been a lot of years, and that really did change with Brian Kelly. Before Brian Kelly was there, Notre Dame routinely got worked in the trenches, especially against SEC competition. It just wasn't even close, Chad. And so it really started to change with Brian Kelly, and now with Marcus Freeman there, you could see it. Like, you normally wouldn't see Notre Dame be more physically dominating against a team like Georgia. And they were.
Yeah.
They were absolutely. They were. Yeah. They ran the ball well. Georgia wasn't able to run it very well. And I thought Notre Dame did a very good job of just out-physicaling Georgia. So that was beautiful to see. They've got to get their passing offense up to snuff a little more if they're able to survive against Penn State. We're going to need a little bit more. We're going to need to get into triple digits passing the ball wise against either Texas or Ohio State.
Yeah, 90 yards and a touchdown's not going to cut it, man.
It's not going to cut it. But, hey, it worked against Georgia. That was beautiful to see. But I've been worried about their passing offense all season long. Luckily, it hasn't killed them in the playoff yet, and hopefully it won't.
How great was that Peach Bowl with Cam Scatterboom and the Sun Devils taking Texas to double OT?
That was crazy, Chad. That was one of the crazier games I've seen in a long time where Texas is up comfortably, 24-8. And then all of a sudden it's like touchdown, 2-point conversion, touchdown, 2-point conversion. Next thing you know, it's overtime, and Texas has to convert 4th and 13 to stay alive. I'm just watching that game like, what am I watching right now? And then the Texas turnaround. They convert, score a touchdown, score another one, and they win the game. That was a wild, wild game. Cam Skattebo did it again. The real deal in college. I'm really curious what he does in the NFL. That had to be the highlight of the bowl season so far, right? What game do you put ahead of Texas, Arizona State?
There's not one. In fact, it's one of the better college games I've seen in quite some time. But, Cam Skattebo, he's one of my favorite college football players of all time. Don't you think that if the right coach, some coach is going to see Skattebo and be like, wait a second, he could be a standout special teams guy. He'd be great in blitz pickup. We could use him on third downs. He can catch the football, and he's great in short yardage situations. Don't you think there's a team out there that will draft him and be happy they did because they can utilize him with his versatility?
There'll be somebody who drafts him for sure. And then as far as what they do, that's me, by the way, not taking a selfie. That's me taking a screenshot of the prop bets for Minnesota, Virginia Tech coming up.
Is that the Duke's Mayo Bowl?
Yeah, we got the Mayo Bowl coming up here. So it's like, I don't know if we take the Minnesota quarterback over 206.5. I'm probably running the ball quite a bit. So I'll probably stay clear. But, Skattebo, he's much more versatile than I thought he would be. But if you've got a bruiser along the goal line, those type of situations, maybe he's more than just a situational type guy. I think he certainly gets drafted, and I'm curious to see what he does. But even if he doesn't pan out in the NFL, what a college career. What a season he had at ASU.
Yeah, he set the single-season mark for rushing yardage, was top 5 in the Heisman voting, and really helped to resurrect a program. I think Skattebo's like the perfect example of why we love sports, Brian, because you get stories like that in college football of a kid that had 2 offers when he was coming out of high school, Holy Cross and Sacramento State, and then he winds up at Arizona State and becomes one of the most dominant players in college football. Like those are the type of stories that movies are made out of, man. I love that kind of stuff.
I do too, and that's the thing is there are so many stories where it's like, how could the scouts, either at the college level or the NFL level, happens there too, how can they be so wrong? How can those be his only 2 offers? And look at what the guy was dominant. They showed, I don't know what game it was, but they showed Skattebo in one off season just completely transform his body. And that's obviously paid dividends. But it's kind of crazy where you look at a guy, look at Josh Allen with the Bills. We mentioned him.
Yeah.
The guy wasn't heavily recruited at all. It barely got to Wyoming. That was like pulling teeth just to get there. And now look at him. He's probably going to be an NFL MVP. So it's pretty wild when guys are that successful and completely fall through the cracks. It happens a lot.
All right. Where does Rocket Ismail rank on your all-time favorite Irish to watch?
That's awesome, man. Like, he was up there, and we got shades of it with the kickoff return for a touchdown against Georgia. Like, any Notre Dame fan that's around my age will think of Rocket.
Yeah. Against Michigan with the 2 returns. Yeah, it was amazing.
It was so good, man. Yes, I love Rocket. Jerome Bettis is one of my favorites. I'll give you a quick story about Rocket. So Rocket, I would go to Notre Dame routinely as a kid and just sort of hang out around campus and get autographs.
That's amazing. Yeah.
One day, because Rocket went to the CFL at first. He was with the Toronto Argonauts.
And he was a stud up there, too.
Yeah, and I went to it's this indoor facility called the Loftus Center. And for some reason, I happened to be there. And it was stunning to me, Chad. Rocket was training. And he had like a Toronto Argonauts bandana on. I'll never forget it. But it was him and another guy he was training with. And they were on the outside lane of a track. And they were running at such a fast pace, Chad. And I'm sitting there just stunned. And this guy, they didn't change their pace. Just lap, fast. And I'm like, wow, these guys, their endurance and just their athleticism, it's on another level.
Yeah, Rocket's one of those guys where I know that, obviously Cheetah's another one, but in terms of college football players, like I don't think I've seen someone run with pads faster than Rocket. He was, once he got a step on you, you had no chance in HE-double hockey sticks of catching him. He was that fast.
He really was.
It's ridiculous.
And that's it. I didn't go to practice very often, but I saw a few things. Ricky Waters was another guy where he
Stud.
scored. I think he scored 3 touchdowns in that Steve Young Super Bowl for the Niners against the Chargers.
He did.
But
He was a great player.
It was crazy, Chad. They showed a drill. They put like these dummies on the ground, and it was just a drill. Like there was a defensive guy trying to tackle the ball carrier. And I'm telling you, Chad, these dummies were not that far apart. There's very, very limited space. And Ricky just had moves upon moves. They couldn't even lay a finger on the guy, let alone tackle. It was insane how some of these guys, how good they were. And Ricky was good in the NFL, but he wasn't, some Hall of Fame type running back. And he was that special in college, you could imagine.
What's cool is that Timmy Brown is one of my favorite Irish of all time, too. And, he was a phenomenal player in the NFL with the Raiders. And he was so cool and so good that even as a Raider player, I respected and adored him because I loved how he handled his business. But I remember the Broncos, right when free agency became a thing in, 93 and 94, when it first, jumped onto the scene, the Broncos got him to an offer sheet. And I was hoping the Broncos would get him, but Al Davis is like, no way in hell I'm going to let Tim Brown go to the Broncos. But I wanted it to happen so bad because I love Tim Brown so much. He's one of the greatest players of all time, stud.
Yeah, I love Tim Brown too. And that was one of the funnier things NFL-wise because he went from the Raiders to Tampa, and he scored his 100th touchdown at Oakland. Like the black hole was right there.
Crazy.
And you know how it is. They just sat there for a second like, wait a minute. The opposing team just scored a touchdown. We don't feel good about this. But they're like, but it's Timmy B. It's Tim Brown. It took them a second, and then they cheered for the guy because at first they're like, wait. We don't like anybody in the other uniform. But they made an exception that day.
That's cool. Man, Brian No, Fox Sports Radio. B-No, thank you, my friend. We'll catch up soon, but that was awesome. That's a great way to kick off 2025.
Oh, dude, Chad, thanks for inviting me, man, all the time. I love talking ball with you, and I hope you have a sensational 2025. Always a pleasure.
You too, buddy. There you go, Brian No, Fox Sports Radio. We'll keep things rolling here on the Rip City Drive, live from Spirit Mountain Casino. Blazers in action tomorrow in Milwaukee to meet Dame and the Bucks. Tip-off at 5. Chris Burkhart will have game day at 3 on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio, presented by Coors Light. All right, big thanks to Brian Noe, Fox Sports Radio. I love talking with him. He just recently headed to Vegas with his lady. I forgot to ask him how things are going down in Vegas. So we'll check in with him soon again. And, of course, with the playoffs right around the corner, there'll be a lot of good things to talk about with Brian Noe. Brenden pointed this out to me. The news popped while I was talking to B. Noe, but the Miami Heat have suspended Jimmy Butler for 7 games. Conduct detrimental to the team. And they have also said they will listen to trade offers. I did look up his contract. He signed that 3-year extension worth $148 million. And he's got a player option next year, and then he'll be unrestricted after that. So it's going to be very difficult. What was I saying in regards to what Heiken was saying with the new apron and everything? It's going to be difficult. He says here that teams are grappling with the restrictions of the new CBA, particularly teams in the second apron, which prevents you from combining salaries in a trade or taking back more money than you send out. It makes deals of any kind, particularly involving big salaries like Grant, Ayton, or Simons, more complicated than they used to be. He went on to say, but we've already seen a few trades. The Warriors picking up Dennis Schroeder and the Lakers adding Dorian Finney-Smith. There will be other moves around the league before the deadline, maybe not blockbusters involving Jimmy Butler or De'Aaron Fox, both the tier of guys below that, which is where some of the Blazers' available players sit. And finally, he said, as the trade landscape evolves and front office is thinking shifts about who's worth giving up what for, what the Blazers' veterans are worth is going to be an important question for the future of the rebuild. So, yeah, it's going to be difficult to move players like Jimmy Butler. And Pat Riley is he's just got the gravitas. He's a little bit different. Well, he's different than everyone else in that position in terms of how he operates because he's got full control, he's got full power, and he's got the gravitas to be able to handle guys differently. And he's hardcore. Jimmy Butler, even at this stage of his career, I hate to see this kind of stuff go down because I like Jimmy Butler. I like the way he plays, the way he competes. He's had a couple of poor exits, like what's going on in Miami now. We saw what happened in Minnesota, but in terms of just a player, I like watching him ball. So we'll see how that shakes out. Obviously, there'll be contenders out there that would be looking for someone like Jimmy Butler. The other part I noticed with the NBA that's interesting to me this year are the teams that are at the top. No surprise that Boston is sitting there at 25-9, but Cleveland right now is 4.5 games in front of Boston in the East at 29-4. They've been sensational this year, and they've won 8 straight games. The Knicks have won 8 straight. They're sitting at 24-10. They're third in the East. The Orlando Magic are fourth in the Western Conference. No surprise that Oklahoma City's atop the West, 5.5 games in front. But Memphis is second at 23-11. Houston sitting there at third at 22-11. So just some different faces than what we've seen recently up, at the top of both conferences. Impressive, the Denver Nuggets at 19-13. With their losses, their lack of depth, still top 4 in the Western Conference. All right, we'll keep things rolling. A lot more football I want to get to. It's going to be a big football weekend. I'll share my thoughts on what I'm seeing from the Final Four remaining in the college football playoff. And the Blazers are going to be back in action tomorrow in Milwaukee to meet the Bucks. Tip-off at 5 here on 620 Rip City Radio.
what you need to know. From the Goldberg Jones Sports Desk, your 620 Rip City Radio headlines. Goldberg Jones. Call 1-800-DIVORCE.
Hey, what's up, my friends? The college football playoff semifinals are set. It's going to be on January 9th and 10th. Penn State will take on Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl. Irish are favored by 1.5. Ohio State and Texas in the Cotton Bowl. Buckeyes a 6.5-point favorite. Four-star Oregon quarterback recruit Jaron Sagapula-Tele has confirmed he's going to enter the transfer portal. We have a big game on Sunday Night Football in Detroit. Lions will host the Vikings. Both teams 14-2. The winner, they get everything. Home field advantage through the NFC. 5:20 on NBC. And right now the Lions are set as a 3-point favorite. The Trailblazers took a loss last night in L.A. to kick off their 5-game road trip. Anthony Simons 23. Double-double for Denny Avdia. Portland continues the 5-game trip tomorrow in Milwaukee against the Bucks. Tip at 5. Chris Burkhardt has Blazers game day at 3 on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio, presented by Coors Light. Hey, Brenden, why do you always lower the volume, man? Crank that. That is some good bleep right there. I love the John Travolta Santa commercial as he's walking around seeing the old characters from Saturday Night Fever. That's pretty awesome. And when he gets out there on the dance floor and starts shaking his booty.
It's a funny commercial.
It's one of the greatest soundtracks in movie history as well. It's not number one. I still think, unfortunately, The Bodyguard with Whitney Houston, it makes sense. She's amazing. But I think The Bodyguard might be the number one selling soundtrack of all time. But this one here is right behind it. The Bee Gees, I think, okay, don't quote me on this. I can't remember if it's top 5 or top 10, but I think they share something with the Beatles. The Beatles and the Bee Gees are the only two groups to have 5 songs in the top 10 at the same time. And it came from this movie for the Bee Gees. And the Beatles, they're just ridiculous. Songwriting of Lennon and McCartney. All right, a lot of things I want to get to. If you want to jump on board and have conversation, feel free. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. I'm going to play something coming up in 20 minutes from Jordan Palmer, brother of Carson Palmer. He's a quarterback guru coach now, similar to what Alex Brink does with E4 Sports. But he was talking about Sam Darnold, who's having an MVP-type season, and he's balling out of his backside. And I'm happy for Sam because I really like him. And, of course, he was drafted by just a crap franchise in the New York Jets. And when you land in certain franchises, they could set you up for failure. You know, it's weird how things work in sports. Like, we all know that certain franchises are a joke, right? And you remember last year before the draft that there was those rumors floating around that Caleb Williams and his dad, his crew, they weren't exactly thrilled at the idea of going to Chicago because they were concerned that maybe the Bears had no clue of what they were doing. Well, he never came out and said it per se, but those are the rumors that were out there. Well, for good reason. Yeah, because he knows that the Bears have proven over the course of time that they really don't have a handle on what they're doing. And I just hate it when we vilify these athletes for being smart and understanding what we already know. Like, right now, I know that you're not an NFL player. I'm not an NFL player either, but you could make a list right now that if you were to be drafted this year in the NFL draft, franchises you would not want to play for, especially if you're a quarterback. I mean, let's just work off the top of our domes right now. Who are some of those teams? Think about this. I think the Bears would be right there at the top. They've got to find a new head coach. I know they're dumb because, first of all, having access to Caleb Williams and then keeping Matt Eberflus as your head coach proves that you have no clue of what you're doing. What they should have done once they knew they were going to have access to Caleb Williams is you thank Eberflus, you get rid of him, and you move on and find the right head coach to come in and develop your quarterback. You know, much like the Washington Commanders did with Jaden Daniels. They went out, new franchise, new front office, new ownership group. They hire Dan Quinn, and then they bring in the proper offensive mind to work with their young quarterback, and they did so with Cliff Kingsbury. And look at the result. Daniels is going to be offensive rookie of the year. He's got them in the postseason, and he's playing lights-out football right now for a rookie. It's awesome because they obviously, the new ownership group, had some common sense to be able to go out and hire the right people. But if I were being drafted as a quarterback in the NFL today, the list of teams that I would not want to go to, and I would voice this and try to use some of the power I have to make sure that that team did not take me. And no one likes this, but yet I think it's smart business if you know that the franchise is a disaster. Right now, the Jets would be right at the top of the list. No thanks, I'm not playing for the Jets. I'll go into talk radio, or I'll play baseball, or utilize my talents elsewhere, but I'm not playing for the Jets. Not doing it, not going to be a part of that, want nothing to do with the New York Jets. Outside of that, the Cleveland Browns would be second on the list. The Cleveland Browns are a proven disaster, and that's because the Haslam family that owns the team, they're dumb, and they make dumb decisions, and they're fools. Just look at what they did with Deshaun Watson. Now, I like their head coach, but their ownership group is a complete joke. They're a disaster, and they should be laughed at. They should be ridiculed because they're performing ownership malpractice. They're dumb. And dum-dums should not have access to great quarterbacks because they destroy them. And it's very bad for the league. So I'm not going to the Jets. I'm not going to the Browns. You could add Jacksonville to the list. I'm not going to play for your franchise, sorry. You don't know what you're doing when it comes to hiring coaches. You don't know what you're doing when it comes to running a franchise. The Jaguars would raise serious concern. Outside of that, if I were to pick maybe a couple of other teams, I'd be very suspect on the Panthers, the Chicago Bears, and that's it. So there's like 5 teams right there that I'm like, I don't want to play for you. And you know what's funny is that we criticize these players when they voice that, or they try to use their power to force themselves in one direction. But look at the result. John Elway is the poster child for this. And this came in a day and age when guys didn't do this, right? But he was the number 1 pick in the awesome 83 quarterback draft. And he let it be known that I'm not going to play for the Colts. They have the number 1 pick. I'm not doing it. If you draft me, I'll go play baseball because I've got the ability to do that. I'll go play for the Yankees. I'm not playing quarterback for you because you're a joke of a franchise. He was ridiculed and blasted as being a baby and being a rich, spoiled kid, a California kid, and all this stuff. And look at what happened. He forces his hand. The Colts trade him to the Broncos, and then what happened with the Colts? They hightailed it out of Baltimore and wound up in Indianapolis. So he and his dad was well-connected as a coach, and he knew some guys around the league. They knew that the Colts were a joke, and they were right. The other, of course, famous one was the Mannings using some of their power when Eli's like, yeah, no thanks, but I don't want to play for the Chargers. Look at the Chargers. For years, severely cheap, and wouldn't hire the right people and wanted to underpay people. And then they're so sucky they couldn't get a new stadium built in San Diego. They got shipped off to L.A. And now they share a stadium with the Rams, and it's not even their city. Like, the people in L.A. don't care about the Chargers. So I understand it. We don't like it because you're just supposed to accept the fact you're going to be the number 1 pick and you got to go wherever you're chosen. But let's face it, not all these franchises are equal. Some of them stink, man. I mean, you know there are places like that, so, we'll see how it shakes out. Yeah, and not everyone's got the fortune of a guy like Patrick Mahomes or a Bo Nix. You get drafted, and all of a sudden you got Sean Payton teaching you and coaching you, and you wind up with a great franchise like Denver that's got a proven track record of success. Or Patrick Mahomes, who goes to Kansas City, gets to sit behind Alex Smith, and then you've got the Kool-Aid man teaching you how to play quarterback, and you've got great players around you. That's a perfect situation. There are certain players that I think are so great they can overcome any situation. Like Josh Allen, when he went to Buffalo, Buffalo's been a good franchise in my lifetime, but when he went there, they didn't exactly have a roster littered with talent. It took time for them to get some players around him, but Josh Allen was able to overcome, and now look, he's going to win the NFL MVP. So with the college football playoff, I don't know if you feel the same way, but for me, I had great intrigue in Oregon in the season they had with Dan Lanning going unbeaten. But they get worked by Ohio State. Now they're out. My team, Arizona State, played one of the most exciting college football games you could imagine against Texas, but they get bumped. So I'm bummed about that. And now the remaining teams are Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame. Not exactly at the top of my list of teams I want to root for, right? So where do you go from here? So I'm trying to find something to latch onto because I feel a little bit I just feel like part of my soul was ripped out with that Texas game. It was a great game, but it's like, okay, what's up with that? With Ohio State, like it's hard for me to pull for Ohio State because their fan base is obnoxious and annoying. So I guess I'm going to pull for them to lose so I could laugh at them. But I do like Will Howard because he seems like a very likable young man. But with Ohio State, I got to give him props. I'm stunned at how well they've dominated in the first 2 games of the playoff against Tennessee and Oregon. Just complete dominance. And for the first time this season, the offense and the defense of the Buckeyes is clicking simultaneously. You know, I was trying to figure out how they were able to turn around so quick after getting their ass whooped by Michigan. Curtin Hillsborough, who's a big Duck fan, he made a good point yesterday. He texted me. He's like, dude, I blame Michigan with the flag planting. And I think he might be right. You know, sometimes a complete disaster can be exactly what you need to get you back on track. To be humble, to be leveled, to be blindsided, to have someone punch you in the face. And so it goes back to this conversation I had with former Bronco wide receiver Rod Smith, one of the all-time Bronco greats. I was talking to him once, and we were talking about that 96 playoff loss to the Jaguars. You know, the Jaguars were in their second year in the NFL. They made the playoffs. The Broncos had the best record in the NFL, and they got home field advantage throughout the playoffs. It was their year to win the title and Elway get his first Super Bowl. And they show up after the bye week, and they face Jacksonville at home. They're a double-digit favorite. It never occurred to me they could lose that football game, and yet they went out and lost a football game. It's the most devastating loss in franchise history. It was a gut punch. And in that moment after the game, I was like, great. That ruins everything, and Elway's never going to get a Super Bowl. But what Rod told me, and, of course, keep in mind that loss came right before they went back-to-back and won 2 championships. But what Rod told me was that loss, as devastating as it was exactly what they needed. It was the proper wake-up call, and it changed. He said it changed everything that they did in terms of the type of players they wanted to add to the roster, the way they were going to call a game, the way that the players prepared in the offseason. It helped to refocus them on all the details that were necessary to go out and do everything you could to win. And when he told me that, I was like, wow, I never thought of it like that. And so I think the Michigan loss for Ohio State really helped them to go back and scrap everything that they were doing from the top down and just do a self-evaluation and realize that, you know what, we're better than this, and we've got to really refocus and change the way that we do everything. The way we're going to call the game, the way we're going to approach the game, and now look at them in the last 2 games. I mean, they're going out there full throttle. So I'm very impressed. Can they keep it up? That's the big question. We've seen 2 great games. Do they have 2 more great games back-to-back to be able to win a championship? Now, with Penn State, you know, the first 2 games against SMU and Boise, they were expected to win. And that's what they do with James Franklin. They beat teams they're supposed to beat. Now, Drew Aller, he's improved his draft stock. He'd probably be a first-round pick if he chose to jump in the NFL draft now, but I think he's going back for another year to Penn State. But I love their front 7 on defense. Their running backs are terrific, and their offense has shown a lot more potency over the last few weeks. So how's the offense going to fare against the physicality of Notre Dame? But Penn State's been very impressive. Even in the loss to Oregon, I was impressed with the game plan, the execution, and the way they were able to put points up on the board. They just couldn't stop Oregon. Now with Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman's a young star. He's intense, great recruiter. They're clearly getting a different athlete now, and they're physical. Look, I don't know if they got enough in the passing game because they had, 90 yards and a touchdown in that win against Georgia. But this is what I do know about winning a championship. The run game and great defense can take you a long way. So don't count out Notre Dame. And with Texas, it's not about talent because they got plenty of talent. It's about Quinn Ewers. Can he limit the big mistakes and produce against Ohio State? And I'm just not so sure about that. All right, we'll come back. We'll find out what Sam Darnold's been doing to get himself in this position to where he's getting himself super paid. He's playing like an MVP, and Minnesota's in a position to make a run at a potential Super Bowl. That's coming up next on the Rip City Drive. All right, final weekend of the NFL season coming up. We got games tomorrow, and we'll have games on Sunday. The Broncos are going to host the Kansas City Chiefs, and right now Denver sits with a record of 9-7, and their situation is very simple. If they win, they're in. If they win, they will make the postseason, and they'll be the number 7 seed in the playoffs. If they lose, it opens up the door for Miami if they win, or Cincinnati if they win and beat Pittsburgh tomorrow night and Miami loses, Cincinnati would get in. So more than likely Denver's going to win and reach the postseason. They play the Chiefs. They're set as like a 9.5-point favorite because Kansas City is going to be resting everyone. But I really don't care so much about the postseason this year. I think it's great that Denver is going to make the playoffs in Bo Nix's first year. But most importantly to me is just Denver finding that guy, the QB1, the quarterback of the future. And I think they've done that. Bo Nix on the season, completing 65% of his balls, 3,400 yards passing, 25 touchdowns, and 12 picks. You know what's amazing about that? Elway did not have 25 touchdowns in a single season passing until 1993. And I think he surpassed that. I think he had 27 in like 97. But Elway never had huge passing numbers based on the offense he played in. And he played for Dan Reeves for years, so they were kind of more of a run-based system. But Bo Nix goes out and drops 25 touchdowns in his first year. But the most important thing to me as a Bronco fan is just seeing Bo Nix development and realizing that they found their guy. Now, the problem is for Denver, if they defeat the Chiefs on Sunday, they'll be the number 7 seed in the AFC playoffs, and that's going to earn you a trip to Buffalo to take on the Bills. And look, there's not a bigger Bronco fan than me, but I know what that means. They will get destroyed. Embarrassed, destroyed, crushed, embarrassed. They'll get squashed by the Buffalo Bills. They have no chance of winning that football game. But that's okay. You get that playoff experience. You go through a week of preparation for a playoff game, and that can be valuable not just for Bo, but the other several young players they have on the roster, because I think what's going to happen now with Denver after this year, Bo Nix was great in his rookie year, but how much better will he be in year 2 and year 3 now that he has a better understanding of the league? The game will start to slow down, and then he'll start to have a better recognition of what defenses are trying to do. What I'm wondering is, with his accuracy and the way his mind processes, how much better will he be able to manipulate defenses with all the nuances of the game as he continues to progress and get more experience? That's the part that's really exciting. So that's the situation for Denver, for you Bo Nix fans out there. If they beat the Chiefs, they're in. If they lose, then they need both Miami and Cincinnati to lose in order to make the postseason. So in other words, just don't lose the game to Kansas City, who's going to be resting all of their starters because they have everything wrapped up. And if you lose the game to Kansas City, you don't deserve to get in. It's that simple. In fact, if you lose to Kansas City, I hope you don't get in, and then that'll teach you for losing 3 straight games to end out the year. But come on, man. I like what I see from Bo. Very, very cool. All right. I want you to hear this. ESPN's best show, I think, is probably Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser. Those guys are studs, and they were talking about the 12-team playoff format and what they think about it so far. Let's take a listen to this.
Sure. Tony, I agree with most everything you said there. I mean, from the top, for me, 12 is too many. And I'm going to disagree with people who are true experts, many of them colleagues and many of them friends on this network who've been talking all day. And they all bless 12. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to bless 12. It needs to be an 8-team tournament. Here's one of the reasons why it needs to be 8. First of all, college kids don't need to play 16 or 17 games in a season. That's heinous. Now, secondly, if you have 8, you don't have buys. You don't need buys. The teams that have buys got beat, and they were rusty. Oregon, come on, Oregon doesn't deserve that fate. You don't need buys. Get in with 8. You seed them 1 through 8, addressing another one of your issues I agree with you on. Yeah. And you put those 8 teams out there, and you see, let's go. The teams that were rusty, Tony, they're at a disadvantage. They hadn't played in a month. Notre Dame had played last week. Ohio State had played like 10 days earlier, not been off for like 26 days. So, no, that's a disadvantage. If you have a bye, you don't want to have a disadvantage. They can fix the seeding. Just fix it. They're not going to go from 12 to 8 because this is a greed play. It's a money play for everybody involved, including this network.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I just think it needs adjusting. I think one of the things that we saw is it belies the fact that the SEC is by far the best conference. That's not true. Tennessee went out in their first game. Georgia went out in their first game. Texas is in, but they're not really an SEC team yet. It's like they came in the transfer portal, just for this 1 year, Texas. So, I mean, and Alabama then lost to Michigan in a bowl game. So I don't want to hear any more about how they got hosed by the committee. All
right, there you go. What do you think about that? I would disagree with the standpoint that it should be 8 teams. The reason why I think 12, and they're going to expand again, they'll get to 14 or 16 teams here in the very near future. The reason why I like the number where it's at right now with 12 teams, it goes back to what I was talking about throughout the course of the season. What the 12-team format brought us was many more great regular season games that have much more meaning. And that's because you had so many different teams that had access to the playoff that we had never seen before. We're talking about teams like SMU, Army, Arizona State. Think about the number of schools that were in a position to potentially make the playoff right up until the very end of the regular season. The reason why that's great is because you have more spots available, which opens up more hope and opportunity for schools that normally wouldn't have an opportunity to get in. I'm talking about the Boise States, Arizona State, all the different schools, Army. It was just great to have these storylines throughout the year with these schools having an opportunity to reach the playoff. And that's what I like about it so much. I think it's added to the regular season. I think one of the unintended consequences is that it does lessen the importance of some of these rivalry games. And I think Ohio State-Michigan would be a perfect example where Ohio State in years past, if they lose a game like that to Michigan at the end of the season, they're not going to be in the playoff. They're not going to have a chance to play for a national championship. So it takes away some of the meaning of those type of rivalry games, but I can live with that. I can get past that. Ohio State now, because they had one bad game on the year, they played one bad game. They played a great game against Oregon on the road and lost, and then they had one bad game against Michigan. Why should that exclude them from having an opportunity to play for a national championship? Notre Dame in years past, in a 4-team playoff or in the BCS era, you lose a home game to Northern Illinois, you ain't getting in. You're done. But with the expanded playoff, you're not expected to be perfect throughout the course of the year. You can have a loss. You can have a bad loss. You can have a couple of losses and still have access to the playoff, and I love that. So I would keep the format, continue to expand. I think 16 would be a spectacular number. And in regards to the bye weeks, look, I mean, I think it's too early to make these bold proclamations. It is true that, the teams that had the byes lost. That's true. But we're talking about a sample size of 1 year. We need more time and more data to be able to know whether or not the bye week is a detriment or not. And I'm not going to base my decision off of 1 year of the playoff. In regards to the format and the seating, look, yes, it's not proper right now. Everyone knew that going in. It's the way it was set up. They had to make concessions to go from the 14 playoff to the 12-team playoff, and part of the concessions that were made was the conference champion getting a bye if they were to win their conference title game. And the reason why they did that is because the conferences wanted to maintain extreme value in the conference title games. And the reason is very simple. The conference title games have great value to the conference because those are one of those big games that they can sell to the network and make big money off of. So they were trying to find whatever way they could to maintain or increase the value of the conference title game. And that's why you had to make the concessions of getting the bye for the conference champion to get to a 12-team playoff from the 4-team. But eventually that's going to be changed. Eventually what they'll do, I think it'll come from a flexing of power from the Big Ten and the SEC where they're going to be like, look, we'll allow the conference championship winner to get the auto bid, but we're not going to seed. We're not going to give automatic buys to the conference winners. We're going to take the conference winners; they're in the playoff, but we're going to seed the tournament according to the final rankings. And then once you do that, then the playoff will have a better form because then Oregon won't be opening up against Ohio State, and you won't have Penn State, who lost the Big Ten championship game to Oregon having an easier pathway to the semifinals than the Ducks did, because that's dumb. We all agree that that's just stupid. If you earn the right to be the number 1 seed, then you should be rewarded based on how it's set up in the brackets, right? It's pretty simple, or just, heck, reseed after the first round. I don't know, whatever. It's they'll figure it out. We're in year 1, so we don't need to be outraged or upset. Just be thankful that we have a freaking awesome playoff with teams that have access that never had access before. It's great. It's a great thing. It is freaking great. All right. I want you to hear this. Jordan Palmer, he's the brother of Carson. He's now a quarterback guru, much like Alex Brink, working with guys. Josh Allen won, and he also works with Sam Darnold. But he was asked about what Darnold has done to get himself in a position to where he's playing MVP-type football, and he's going to get himself well paid. And he's went from a cast-off with the Jets, crappy franchise, to now being in a position to where the Vikings drafted J.J. McCarthy, but now they're probably not going to let Sam Darnold go because he's playing such great football. But here's what Jerome Palmer had to say on Fox Sports Radio.
Well, his talent hasn't changed, right? He hasn't grown 2 inches since the draft. He hasn't gotten way faster. All these players' careers should evolve. Their throwing mechanics should evolve. Their understanding of defenses. So there's been an evolution over the last 6 years. The other thing is I don't think he'd ever really been through a ton of adversity, in high school and college, right? Kind of was a meteoric deal here at
Hero
SC.
ball, and he was winning them.
And then just getting drugged through the mud for multiple years, getting traded away for nothing, I think hardened him. And yes, the Kevin O'Connell, the pieces in the huddle, we don't need to spend time talking about how good the Minnesota Vikings roster and front office and coaching staff is, because that's all everybody's talking about. The biggest thing for him that I've seen is that in all of those years of kind of getting punched in the gut, the media and the teams and traded and all that, I just never saw him cut a corner. I've never had this guy show up 15 minutes late, have to bail early. I've just never seen it. And the way that I work with him and Joe Burrow as well is it really is an annual relationship where, yes, the offseason we try and find, similar to what Tom Brady used to talk about, try and find 1 or 2 things, right? Because when you get to the level where you're playing where Sam is right now and Joe is right now, there's still an offseason coming up. They're still going to try and get better. And so what we do is in the offseason, we build the programming and look at what has been working and what can you build on. And then in season, every single week, we're reviewing things. And there's 3 categories. 1, what are you doing great that you need to continue to do great? Let's highlight it. What do you need to work on, which means you used to do it better than you did, and it's taken a step back for whatever reason. And then the third one is something to think about. Maybe something showed up in somebody else's game. Sam's attention and focus on those things, regardless of how bad it was going and right now how well it is going, the fact that his approach hasn't changed, I think is really actually like a superpower. Your willingness to buy in, find individual things to get better at is the superpower. And there's a perfect example. So bye week, it was week 6, I think, this year for them. He comes out here and we spend a day together. And at that point this season, at that point in the season, I think it was 24.8% of his misses, not necessarily incompletions, just a little off, was out breaking routes to the right. Identify a mechanical issue, not drawing the shoulder in, whatever the details were, address it, show how he can work on it at home, how he can work on it in practice, what he can add to warm-ups. And from the bye week to now, he's got 1 miss on an out breaking route to the right when the ball.
Isn't that amazing? I'd love to hear the detail that these high-level quarterbacks go through in terms of their preparation and their continued pursuit of excellence. So Sam Darnold, according to Jordan Palmer, never showed up late, never had to leave early, continued to be as consistent in his work ethic and his approach that he'd had throughout the course of time. And then, through the adversity that he had to deal with, he learned how to handle that, and he just continued to have the right mindset to continue to work. And I love that, too, where it's like, okay, you could be having a great year, and Sam Darnold certainly is having a great year, but even during the bye week, he's taking a look at all the different things, what's going well, what's not, what do I need to work on, and you're continuing to refine that process. I love that. And so that's why it's easy to cheer for guys like Sam Darnold, because of the work they're putting in and the persistence in their pursuit of greatness. And then finally he winds up with a good franchise, with a good coach and good playmakers around him. And now, look, he's flourishing with the Minnesota Vikings, which is great. He's been terrific. And we've seen the same type of process with Baker Mayfield, who's having a tremendous year right now. But Sam Darnold, I like him. I liked him coming out of USC. I like his attitude, his moxie, his playmaking ability. And now with a good franchise, he's able to showcase what he's about. And a lot of these guys don't get that second opportunity, right? But he's got the talent and the ability to be that type of guy, which I think is phenomenal. So props to Sam Darnold for that work process and the way he's been able to do it. And this year, look at what he's done. 35 touchdowns, 12 picks, completing 68% of his passes. He's thrown for over 4,000 yards, and his team is 14-2. I mean, that's unbelievable. And Baker Mayfield, who, just like Darnold, was a cast-off in Cleveland because the franchise is, well, they're dumb. And they weren't patient, and they didn't develop him or work with him the right way. And look at what he's done this year. 39 touchdowns, 15 picks. His team's going to make the postseason, completing 71% of his passes. It's great. And he's matured, too. He handles himself differently. His teammates respect him. And I just like these type of redemption stories. You know, Geno Smith to a lesser degree because he doesn't have the necessarily the talent. He's not the level of quarterback that maybe Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold is, but he grinded too and continued to work and finally got the right situation in Seattle, and he's been able to flourish and get a new contract. What are your thoughts on this, Brenden?
Yeah, I think it's I think fit is everything, Chad, and we're finding that out, in the biggest way because, like you said, the amount of memes that I have seen this year where there was at one point a couple years ago, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold were on the same bad Panthers squad, right? And here we are now, and going back to your point on Sam Darnold, because the Vikings have been one of my favorite teams to root for this year for that. I mean, Chad, I know that Darnold came in with experience, but do you remember how many people were ready to write off the Vikings after J.J. McCarthy was hurt? And it was, they have Justin Jefferson, but Sam Darnold, we know that story. And they've been one of the coolest stories there is. And you also threw in Baker, threw in Geno Smith, a couple great ones too. I don't think it's like, one size fits all. I'm not sure if you gave Kevin O'Connell, Zach Wilson, he could turn him into a stud. I think sometimes there are circumstances, but going back to what you were saying, I remember that Rose Bowl, USC, Darnold versus Saquon, and that was such a game, and I remember being like, wow, there's going to be several guys in this team that go pro, and it's been really cool to see Darnold have his comeback, and I hope he gets a bag, whether that's from the Vikings, from somebody else. The kid deserves it because when I hear what you played there from Palmer, that how easy, Chad, it would have been after you were traded for like the third time, be like, I don't need to go work out 5 days this week. I just want to go work out 4 or something like that. And to hear that he never relinquished, that's pretty cool.
No doubt. In other notes, Saquon Barkley reached the 2,000 yard club as a rusher, which is amazing. Props to Saquon. He's had a phenomenal year in the MVP conversation for sure. He's been great for Philadelphia. And the Eagles take Saquon and make him look like a superstar. I'm glad that he's not going to pursue the rushing mark. And the reason why is because Eric Dickerson's 84 season is legendary. Eric Dickerson has the record for the most rushing yards in a season at 2,105. Eric Dickerson's one of my favorite players of all time. And I don't want the record to go down because Dickerson did it in 16 games where, Saquon's obviously got the extra game now that they're at 17. And I think, what was it? I think OJ did it in less than 16 too. Let's see here. OJ Simpson. Yeah, Simpson still holds the NFL record for rushing yards per game in a season at 143.
Man,
and they won the MVP and the Offensive Player of the Year award. Yeah, that's cooking right there. How many years was that? How many games? Let's see here. How many games? Let's just go to Rabbi Google here.
No, I believe 14 games OJ. That year in 73 for OJ, Chad. That's what you're looking for?
It's 14, right?
Yeah,
correct. 14 game. Yeah, so 14. He had 2014. That's absurd. Wow. That's probably your best individual rushing season right there from Oj. 143 yards a game, still an NFL record. All right, we'll come back. Rip City Drive, Chad doing with you. Getting ready for the weekend. And the final weekend of the NBA regular season. Blazers back in action tomorrow. Tip-off in Milwaukee against the Bucks at 5. Chris Burker, I will have game day at 3 here on 620 Rip City Radio. That's such a great song. It still sounds brand new today. That is a very good song. Philip Bailey and Phil Collins. All right, I saw the numbers. Dang it. And where did I put that? The Arizona State-Texas Peach Bowl averaged 17.3 million viewers, and the Rose Bowl averaged just over 21 million viewers. So a very good day of football viewing. The Notre Dame-Georgia game was down a little bit, and I think that's only because they moved it. Had to move it in order to, obviously for the terrorist attack that took place in New Orleans. And it was on earlier in the day at 1 o'clock. If it would have had that captive audience on New Year's Day later in the day, it would have hit bigger numbers too. But very good showing for the college football playoff. And I'm glad that so many people got to sit back and watch Cam Scattaboo put on a show. What a great football name. What a great player he is. But, yeah, I went back and rewatched the game last night. It's always nice to go back and watch a game, when you get out of the emotion of being right in the middle of it and just rewatch a game. It's like, wow, I thought it was a great game, but in review, it was a great game. And that fourth quarter was very wild and unexpected. So I enjoyed that a great deal. And hopefully the game's coming up on the 10th and the 20th with the championship game, that we can have a couple more moments like that. I love those type of things. Love the excitement. But, the college football playoff is going to get better. They'll continue to tinker with things and get the format and the seating proper. They'll get there. And then that'll be good. But, man, that was such a great game. Gosh dang it. That's one of those moments. I wish I could go back and relive that. It was like one of those games where you're watching. It's like, is this really happening right now? But it was good, man. Cam Scattaboo is cool. He is super cool. That's a big-time football player right there. What I'm hoping is that my next dream is that the Denver Broncos will draft him. I saw a couple of guys talking about Scattaboo. Maybe he's like the next Taysom Hill for Sean Payton. But he's one of those players that
that would be fun.
Please, it'd be so much fun because I think he can be a good player because you can use him in a variety of different ways. But I'd love to see the Broncos draft him. And if they draft him, I promise you, Denver, I will go out and buy a Scattaboo jersey right away. Get a Broncos Scattaboo jersey, and then that'd be money. I like it when players, because I like following college players that I rooted for. Like it's going to be fun to watch Shedeur Sanders because I think he's going to be a phenomenal NFL quarterback. I follow Justin Herbert. Even though I don't care for the Chargers, I love Jim Harbaugh and I love Justin Herbert. And by the way, were we right on that one or what? The Chargers, after years of being cheap and not doing things the right way, they finally did what was necessary, and they spent big money to bring in Jim Harbaugh. And in life how sometimes you really do get what you pay for? How about the Chargers finally ponying up the cash and bringing in the right coach? And look what he's done. I mean, it took less than a year, and he had that situation turned around. And he doesn't even have the benefit of having the type of players littered up and down the roster of the guys that he wants. He's still making it work with other guys. He's going to continue to retool the roster, and then as he gets more of his guys in there, they'll develop that Harbaugh, even more so of that mentality and that toughness to where they're going to be able to play Harbaugh ball. But just the decision-making, the organization, and the toughness that he's brought to the team this year, you can see the difference. Brandon Staley was not good, but Jim Harbaugh is one of the best. And then, for Justin Herbert, he's one of those college players that I'm going to watch his career because I like him. Big fan of Justin Herbert. Love watching him play. I think he's a quarterback extraordinaire. Bo Nix, I was a big fan of in college. Just fortunate enough to where he wound up on my favorite NFL team, but it's going to be fun to watch him as he continues to develop. The one player that did not, pencil out in the NFL quite the way I thought he would is I remember watching Jameis Winston as a freshman at Florida State. He's one of the best young players I've ever seen in the NFL. Just his ability to make plays, his delivery of the football, I was like, wow, this guy's unbelievable. But it just hasn't matched up in the NFL. He's been okay. He's a good backup. Sean Payton did some good work with him in New Orleans, but obviously the mistakes, the turnovers have become an issue. But I was surprised that he didn't turn out to be a more prolific NFL-type quarterback. And then there are guys like that. But there are certain college players that like to follow their careers to see how they do, how they turn out, and to see if they can, become, what type of pros they're going to become. certain players, I like the players too that you think you're not really sure if they're going to be good or not, but then they turn out to have, long NFL careers. And some teams are really good at finding the undrafted free agents out of college that turn out to be good, college football players. But the next guy I'm going to be watching is Sam Levitt at Arizona State, the quarterback out of West Linn. Watched every one of his games this year. He's got nimble feet, so we saw that in the Peach Bowl. He can move, he can scramble. His decision-making for a young quarterback with very little experience so far appears to be very sound. He's clearly getting good coaching, but his feel for the game in the passing game, his delivery of the football, being on time and on target, I'm anxious to see what the development's going to be like with another full year of off-season training and going through the spring ball and getting ready for a new season. I want to see where it goes from here. But he looks like he's got the ability to be an NFL-type guy. So I'm going to watch him and his development. With Cam Ward, what's his listed height at? Was he like 6'1"? Cam Ward height. Yeah, he's listed at 6'2". I like Cam Ward a lot. I think he's got a chance to be a terrific NFL quarterback. I'm a little worried about his size. With Dylan Gabriel, one of my favorite players in college, I love Dylan Gabriel, but I think he's like 5'11". See, the problem is, when you at a certain height, then it becomes a situation where you're going to have to find the right fit and the right coaching that's willing to kind of create an offense around you. The problem is, and we see it with Kyler Murray, even Russell Wilson at times, these guys who are a little bit undersized, the intermediate passing game becomes a problem because you can't, see over the line of scrimmage. Batted balls become a problem. You don't have the same type of vision because you're impaired by the big guys that are in front of you because those linemen are monsters. So I want good things for Dylan Gabriel, but he's going to have to find the right coach and the right system that would tailor something around him. And with Cam Ward, he's a little bit bigger than Gabriel, but I still think he's more 6'1" than 6'2". But the good thing is about the NFL is that we're seeing more of a willingness from the old school train of thought where you needed to be a 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" quarterback that could stand in the pocket. You're seeing some teams embrace different forms of quarterbacking to try and put these guys in a position to have success. Arizona was willing to do that with Kyler Murray. Heck, even when I was younger, Doug Flutie, undersized quarterback who had, success in the NFL. But it requires a franchise to embrace that type of situation. Now with Shedeur, he's more of he's bigger. Vision's not a problem. Arm strength is there. Toughness has been on display the 2 years at Colorado. He's got the pedigree coming from the family he does, with Prime being his dad. So I think Shedeur. I would pick Shedeur number one. Now, by the way, what were the Giants doing what are these teams doing winning football games with Raiders and Giants? What are you guys, idiots? Current NFL draft order. We got to check that right now. After last weekend's, they got it on Tankathon, one of the great sites. Right now, New England. Here's your current draft order. New England, this will be your top 10. New England, Tennessee, Cleveland, the Giants, the Jags, Carolina, the Jets, the Raiders, and the Bears. So New England just drafted a quarterback, and they're not – they just took Drake May, so they're not going to draft a QB. Tennessee will be in the market for a quarterback, and I would expect Cleveland at 3 to be in a market for a quarterback. So really, New England's in a great position because they have their quarterback in Drake May, and then all these other teams below them that are sitting there, like Tennessee and Cleveland, if they're desperate, they might want to talk to New England about moving up to 1 to make sure they secure the guy they want, or maybe the Giants at 4. Who are these teams that are going to want a quarterback? So New England, no. Definitely a yes on Tennessee. Cleveland, yes. The Giants, yes. No on the Jags. Yes on Carolina. You would think the Jets, but they're dumb, so who knows. The Raiders, the Bears have theirs, and New Orleans. So you could have 7 teams in the top 10 looking for a quarterback. And then you've got, New England sitting there at the top. So New England will probably be open for business. Yeah, we're open for business. Just make us an offer, and if you want to move up to number 1, it's available for you. Well, that's going to do it for me. Big thanks for your time. Tomorrow, don't forget, Blazers game day at 3 with Chris Burkhart. And then tip-off with the Bucks will be at 5 here on 620 Rip City Radio, your home of the Trailblazers, presented by Coors Light. A big thanks to Brenden Slaughter at Master Control. A big thanks to Brian No Fox Sports Radio and also Max Torres of Scoop Duck. Coming up next, we're going to kick it over to live coverage of the Duke's Mayo Bowl with Minnesota and Virginia Tech. I will talk to you on Monday. Have a good night, my friends.